The era known as the Forging, or frequently dubbed as the Golden Age of the Imperium by imperial historians, marks a pivotal period of expansion and consolidation for the Imperium of Man, approximately spanning the 32nd to the 34th millennium. This epoch was characterized by the rapid integration of significant human-settled star systems, previously untouched by the Great Crusade. This period witnessed the imperial administration's success in extending the boundaries of the Imperium across the galaxy further still. Internal stability during the Forging was also significantly enhanced by the establishment of the astropathic across numerous worlds, major communication hubs, and being strategically positioned on the most fortified imperial worlds, including Armageddon, Baka, and Macragge, which all played a crucial role in creating a more stable Imperium after the heresy. These hubs enabled a dependable network of interstellar communication, which leveraged the astropath's unique astrotelepathy to relay messages across vast distances, sometimes hundreds to thousands of light years, almost instantaneously. The period also marked a crucial deceleration in the decline and stagnation of the Imperium's technological prowess. This was catalyzed by the rediscovery of a valuable standard template construct database from the Dark Age of Technology, which was located in the Kana system. The renewed access to this advanced technology spurred growth in the Imperium's interstellar economy, and it gave a rather large boost to its technological rejuvenation, as the Imperium would now expand its reach further than what the Emperor had been able to do so during his time. The Imperium's efforts during the Forging, however, would not be without conflict. The forces of Chaos Renegades, Heretics, and a myriad of uncountable Xenos factions were met with the staunch resistance of humanity, as they attempted to take what was clearly not theirs. The Imperium successfully repelled all these threats, while reclaiming numerous lost and rebellious regions in the process. In parallel with these military and administrative advances, the Emperor of Mankind, already a central figure of veneration, would see an increase in his devoted following. Following his ascension to the Golden Throne, the Emperor's status as a divine figure would be further solidified, leading to the rise of various imperial cults dedicated to his worship. By the 32nd millennium, these cults were consolidated into a centralized religious institution known as the Temple of the Savior Emperor. This powerful ecclesiastical body, colloquially known as the Ecclesiarchy, was officially recognized as the state religion of the Imperium and designated as the Adeptus Ministorum at this time. The Ecclesiarchy's influence continued to grow, culminating in the 32nd millennium, when Ecclesiarch Fenris II was granted a seat amongst the High Lords of Terra. 3 centuries later, this position was permanently enshrined within the ranks of the Senatorum Imperialis, solidifying the Ecclesiarchy's integral role within the governance of the Imperium. In the year 597 M32, the galaxy trembled under the assault of Abaddon the Despoiler, the notorious War Master of Chaos. With a ferocity that shook the foundation of the Imperium once more, Abaddon initiated his second Black Crusade. His onslaught began with the devastating assault upon the worlds of the Bellis Corna sector, imbuing these regions with the corrupting influence of the warp. Concurrently, Abaddon's fleet launched a relentless assault on the sector's imperial shipyards, annihilating numerous imperial cruisers that were either under construction or undergoing repairs. The War Master's campaign was marked by a swift and decisive efficiency not seen since the times of the early heresy. Before the Imperium could amass a significant counterforce, Abaddon would quickly retreat into the Eye of Terror, leaving his ruinous work in his wake. The restoration order within the Imperium's highest echelons came in 646 M32. Argenthio, the chapter master of the Ultramarines, orchestrated a historic gathering on Terra. By unifying over 50 leaders from various Space Marine chapters, the Ultramarines chapter master effectively quelled the factional strife that had plagued the High Lords of Terra since the turbulent period known as the Beheading. The exact proceedings of this assembly still remain shrouded in secrecy. However, the result was a reinstatement of the 12 High Lords. The unity displayed by the Space Marine chapters restored stability, and any lingering dissent was quickly quelled, leaving no one to voice a challenge to the renewed order. The Imperium's forces then faced another shadowy conflict in 888 M32, known as the Astropath War. Unfortunately, the Imperium's records could only provide scant details on this mysterious conflict, leaving it, in essence, largely obscured from historical scrutiny. Eventually, the Third Black Crusade would be initiated once again by Abaddon the Despoiler in 909 M32, and it would escalate the threat posed by Chaos when Abaddon unleashed a demon prince known as Talmon upon the Cadian Gate, initiating a brutal and reckless frontal assault. The demonic host that was unleashed by Talmon resulted in immense casualties as millions perished in the chaos that ensued. This onslaught drew in Astra Militarum regiments and Space Marine chapters from across Segmentum Obscurus, and the conflict would reach a critical juncture when the Space Wolves managed to repel Talmon and drive him, along with his remaining forces, back into the depths of the warp. Amidst the carnage, it seems that Abaddon seized an opportunity to orchestrate a sacrilegious act against the Shine World of Grishol. Under the guise of the widespread chaos, Abaddon's forces descended upon the sacred site by breaking an ancient seal on the tomb of the revered Imperial Saint Grishol. This desecration was driven by the desire to thwart a prophecy that foretold the saint's resurrection. In the event known as the Eye of Darkness opened for the last time, a resurrection that was believed would come to challenge the forces of treachery and potentially subdue them permanently. In the year 910 M32, the galaxy witnessed a conflict known as a firestorm. Imperial records offer no additional details on this event, leaving the nature and its impact on humanity largely shrouded in mystery. The War of the Confessor would erupt at some point during the 33rd millennium, which marked a drastic assertion of power by the Adeptus Ministorum. In a striking demonstration of their newfound political influence, the Ministorum capitalized on the upheavals following the War of the Beast. During this period, numerous shrine worlds were incorporated into the Ministorum's expanding domain. This conflict was one of many wars of faith to follow, and underscored the growing clout and power of the ecclesiarchy within the Imperium's proper power structure. In 265 M33, Admiral Ursus of the Imperial Navy found himself at odds with the High Lords of Terra, as his ambitious pursuits had raised concerns, but his political influence within the Navy was significant enough to prevent execution without risking a costly civil war occurring. Instead, Ursus was assigned an explorator mission to the intergalactic Gulf beyond the Milky Way. Over the next decade, his reports reached Terra via astropathic messages detailing the successful conquest of new star systems in the name of the Emperor. However, after 20 years, these reports abruptly ceased. Efforts to re-establish contact with the star system that Ursus had explored were unsuccessful, leaving their fate unknown. Later, the Siege of Eternity Gate would unfold in 1313 M33, though Imperial records once more provide scant information about the specifics of the siege, which unfortunately leave its broader context to historical speculation. In 615 M33, an extraordinary event would occur with the re-emergence of the Blade of Infinity, which was a pre-heresy cruiser, into Imperial space. This ancient vessel, having re-entered real space after what had appeared to be a staggering 20,000 years, suggested a severe anomaly in the time stream, predating even the invention of warp drives during the Dark Age of technology. The ship's Vox communications hinted at an urgent warning, but their message was barely deciphered before the Blade of Infinity vanished once again back into the warp. The reappeared Blade of Infinity was soon followed by an invasion fleet of heretic Astartes from a myriad of traitor legions, who unleashed chaos and destruction upon the Imperium once more. The Blade of Infinity re-emerged from the warp on several subsequent occasions, each time heralding further incursions into Imperial space by the forces of chaos. However, while the pattern of these appearances raised concerns about the ship's role as a precursor to larger threats to the Imperium from the Imperium, it seems that the ship itself was not tainted by the warp and is not under the command of any traitor-aligned forces. In 831 M33, an extraordinary event known as the Year of the Ghosts unfolded within Segmentum Solar. During this time, the honored dead rose from their eternal rest to confront and repel yet another incursion from the warp. This spectral uprising marked a rare episode in the Imperium's history, showcasing the enduring power and influence of those who had passed and were loyal to humanity, which were beyond the mortal realm. The Fourth Black Crusade would then follow, or the Elfanor War, in 1 M34, with Abaddon the Despoiler once again leading an offensive force deeply into Imperial space from the Eye of Terror. His Black Legion launched a brutal siege against the renowned citadel of the Cromarch on the world of Elfanor. Known for its nigh impenetrable defenses, the citadel's adamantium gates stood as a formidable barrier, and despite Abaddon's relentless assault, only a fraction of his forces, about 1 in 10, reached the gates before being pinned down by heavy bolter fire. Utilizing his formidable demon sword, Drachnaion, Abaddon eventually breached the gates and split them asunder with a devastating blow. The ensuing conflict was marked by a relentless and savage onslaught, as the traitor legions, bolstered by their demonic allies, descended upon the world and its defenders, extinguishing their ancient lineage and severely compromising the defenses of the Cadian Gate. This destruction significantly weakened the Imperium's ability to repel further chaos invasions. During the early years of the 34th millennium, a dire threat would emerge once more from beyond the Ghoul Stars, a menace that had since been obscured from public knowledge. The threat, known as the Pale Wasting, is said to have caused the annihilation of numerous Space Marine chapters and ended innumerable lives. While much of the information surrounding the Pale Wasting has been censored and deliberately erased by the Inquisition, some fragmented accounts describe it as a star-spawned plague that ravaged entire worlds simultaneously, or more aptly as nightmare engines that decimated entire sectors. A stele within the Imperial Palace on Terra commemorates the Nova Marines for their role in combating the Pale Wasting. The artifact lauds the chapter's efforts that they made that which cannot die, implicating something akin to the undead or ever-living having been involved in said event. Despite this high recognition, the Nova Marines' own records remain suspiciously silent about their involvement in the conflict. This campaign stands as one of the chapter's earliest recorded battle honors, yet the lack of detail and/or any accounts from the Nova Marines' perspective leaves the nature of the Pale Wasting mostly shrouded in obscurity. Had it not been for this official recognition, the episode may have faded entirely from memory. In 401 M34, the Imperium was shaken once again, this time by an event known as a Howling. This crisis reached its peak when the Black Templar Space Marines successfully ended the Calixtus heresy. Their target, Cacomodus, an alien cybernetic psychic whose formidable abilities allowed it to exert control over the populace of over 1,300 star systems. The death of this alien cybernetic unleashed a devastating scream which was amplified by the warp, leading to untold havoc to be wreaked across the galaxy. The scream overwhelmed and destroyed the minds of billions of human astropaths, and severely distorted the Astronomicon's beacon for a significant amount of time. In the immediate aftermath was the catastrophic destruction and loss of millions of ships, and entire sectors of the Imperium being cast into chaos, regressing them into barbarism in the absence of Terra's guidance. The staggering price for victory would be a stark reminder of the far-reaching consequences of such powerful and destructive psychic forces being allowed to exist. The Nova Terra Integratum, also known as the Time of the Twin Empires, was a tumultuous era from the early 35th to the very earliest 36th millennium, and during this period, the Imperium seemed to fracture into two warring factions for just over 900 years. The rebellious Council of Nova Terra had asserted independence, all the while dismissing the authority of the High Lords of Terra and declaring themselves and its own dominion of Segmentum Pacificus as independent of Terra's control permanently. This schism led to a protracted period of instability and conflict within the Imperium, which further weakened the Imperium's possessions on the galactic scale. Parallel to these upheavals was the Adeptus Mechanicus experiencing its own internal strife during the Integratum, which one of its most significant conflicts was the Moray Schism, which erupted in the 35th millennium, as this doctrinal struggle pitted the traditional Martian orthodoxy of the cult of the Mechanicus against the radical faction inspired by the prophetic writings of a triad of tech marines known from the Forge world of Moria. The Moria Schism became one of the most divisive and extensive doctrinal conflicts of the Adeptus Mechanicus since the Horus Heresy, and despite the eventual annihilation of the Moirae, obliterated by the rectification fleet sent by the Fabricator General of Mars, the heretical writings of the Forge world seemed to spread rapidly throughout multiple Mechanicus domains. The influence of these radical doctrines extended even to the Titan Legions, along with several Space Marine chapters, who had close ties with the Adeptus Mechanicus, such as the Iron Hands, who from here would sever into multiple chapters, based on where they aligned with the schism, in a rather notable peaceful manner. In 975 M35, the Imperium, after nearly a millennium of low-grade civil conflicts and political maneuvering, faced a pivotal crisis known as a Cataclysm of Souls. During this year, the Ecclesiarchy made a dramatic bid to transform the Imperium into a theocracy, and their intention was simple: to consolidate political power by subverting the authority of the High Lords of Terra and uniting all of humanity under a singular theocratic rule. This ambitious plan, however, incited widespread religious civil wars. The Council of Nova Terra, labeled as heretics for opposing the Ecclesiarchy's consolidation of power, became a focal point of this conflict, as the conflict would spread across multiple segmentums from Segmentum Pacificus onwards, resulting in the brutal, protracted struggle that ultimately led to the overthrow of the Council, as the High Lords of Terra would be restored to power and control over the Imperium. However, despite this, the Ecclesiarchy's influence expanded dangerously as the consequences of these wars would set the stage for the dreaded Age of Apostasy, which occurred in the 36th millennium. The catastrophic religious upheavals cost the Imperium billions of lives and countless resources. In 800 M35, the galaxy would once again be ravaged by an old enemy, the Herud Rising. This event saw a massive onslaught from the Herud, a mysterious and malevolent species, as their aggressive expansion and attacks spread across the galaxy and created devastation upon numerous sectors of the Imperium, which added another layer of strife to this tumultuous period, which would eventually lead us to right before the cursed 21st founding. In 991 M35, this marked a significant and troubled chapter in the history of the Adeptus Astartes, as this founding was the largest since the second founding following the Horus Heresy, and was conducted just before the onset of the Age of Apostasy. On the world of Inculaba, a covert geno-laboratory was the site of the Homo sapiens Novus project, an attempt by the Mechanicum's generators to correct the known deficiencies in Astartes' gene seed and produce a new and improved Primarch-like series of Space Marine. However, the project was fundamentally flawed, as the generators' efforts continuously fell short of the Emperor's mastery in the genetic sciences, and resulted in defective gene seed, which was used to create new chapters. These chapters were often afflicted with severe genetic anomalies, which soon strained at the tolerance of the Inquisition and jeopardized the very existence of these Astartes chapters. One of the most afflicted chapters would even face the wrath of the Grey Knights, summoned by the Inquisition to purge a threat on the Imperium. Some of these chapters managed to evade retribution only to later turn to chaos, becoming traitors and further compounding the Imperium's woes. Others, more well-known chapters, continue to suffer endlessly to this day, such as the Lamenters. In the year 104 M36, the Imperium of Man would be drawn into a protracted conflict known as the War of Recovery. This war was ignited by a series of fragmented reports of extraordinary technological advancements found on the planet of Mortarion. These reports suggested the presence of valuable standard template constructs in databases which could potentially outstrip anything the Imperium had at the time. This knowledge spurred the Adeptus Mechanicus into action. Driven by the possibility of recovering lost technological secrets, the Mechanicum embarked on a monumental expedition. The war that followed lasted over a century, which was marked by fierce and escalating combat. The Adeptus Mechanicus, equipped with newly recovered advanced weaponry, engaged in a relentless campaign to liberate human colonies in the Mortarion sector from their xenos occupation. Eventually, their efforts would not only restore these colonies to Imperial control, but also led to the successful retrieval of several first-generation copies of STC databases. These databases contained crucial information on various technologies which were triumphantly returned to Mars. The War for Recovery thus represented a significant victory for humanity through the Adeptus Mechanicum, in both terms of reclaiming lost human worlds from vile xenos invaders and retrieving valuable technological knowledge, which would advance the Imperium's causes by making it even more powerful than it was before. As the 36th millennium dawned on the Imperium of mankind, it would be plunged into a period of unprecedented turmoil and division, known as the Age of Apostasy. The seeds of this crisis were sown during the earlier Nova Terra Intergenium, which had already left the Imperium fraught with a deep political rift that would lead to a series of power struggles. In the Age of Apostasy, these fractures widened into chasms of dissent and corruption. During this dark period, reason would be eclipsed by zealotry, and the Emperor's word was systematically undermined by a cadre of corrupt ideologues, each vying to seize total control of the Imperium. As the Age of Apostasy is now renowned as one of the bloodiest epochs in Imperial history, rivaling even the horrors of the Horus Heresy. Circa 200 M36, the Age of Apostasy would become defined by a brutal reign of blood under the tyrannical rule of High Lord Goj Vandire. Vandire was a deranged despot who consolidated his power through a ruthless combination of bribery, blackmail, coercion, and murder, assuming dual roles of ecclesiarch and the masters of the Adeptus Administratum. Under Vandire's oppressive regime, the Imperium would be engulfed in a series of wars of faith, as Vandire sought to extend his dominion and cement his control over the entirety of the galaxy single-handedly. The reign of blood persisted for over 70 Terran years, until a pivotal turning point would occur on the world of Diamar. There, a reformist known as Sebastian Thor and his sect, the Confederation of Light, denounced Vandire as a traitor to the Emperor. Thor, who was a narrator of unparalleled skill, rallied billions to his cause, sparking a decisive rebellion. The final act of this chapter would come as Vandire would be besieged on Terra by multiple Space Marine chapters and Astra Militarum regiments. The Space Marines' fleets would deliver devastating orbital bombardments upon Terra, catching the traitors largely exposed. In the chaos, a Custodes would be informed of what had been occurring, and he would lead a cadre of Sisters of Battle, at the time known as the Brides of the Emperor, to see the Emperor himself, so they may be enlightened to what had been happening. Realizing they had been duped and essentially turned into his personal hit squad, these Sisters of Battle slew Vandire. In the wake of Vandire's fall, the ecclesiarchy would undergo a profound transformation, as the Brides of the Emperor would be reorganized into the Adeptus Sororitas, or the Sisters of Battle, forming the armed wing of the ecclesiarchy due to them being restricted from having men at arms, and becoming an official part of the Chambers Militant of the newly established Ordo Hereticus, and being at least partly under the umbrella of the Inquisition. The Ordo Hereticus was then charged with eradicating internal threats to the Imperium and overseeing the ecclesiarchy, thereby preventing the rise of future tyrants such as Vandar. Sebastian Thor would emerge as a new ecclesiarch after this event, ushering in a new doctrine which would replace the old orthodoxy with the Confederation of Light's own theology, emphasizing political control of the Emperor's realms. However, not all accepted this new direction, as many of the old believers would retreat into secrecy, forming a heretical faction known as the Temple Tendency. This sect would continue to trouble the frontier regions of the Imperium for centuries to come, ensuring that a shadow of the Age of Apostasy would not so easily be forgotten. Ironically, this time, the Imperium was saved via the invasion by loyalist Astartes. The year was 310 M36, which witnessed the dreaded Plague of Unbelief, a dark chapter in the border of the Age of Apostasy. This tumultuous period unfolded several decades after the fall of Goj Vandar and the subsequent ascension of Sebastian Thor as ecclesiarch. And while Vandar's reign of terror had ended, the remnants of instability and dissent would continue to plague the Imperium. During this era of turmoil, numerous false prophets would emerge. Their influence was varying, due to being anything from rogue leaders commanding rebel armies to charismatic demigods who controlled entire worlds, or even sector-spanning forces under the rule of a single individual. Amongst these, the apostate cardinal Bureaucrax of Gathamor stood out for his formidable heretical impact. His rebellion reached an extreme level that became known as the Plague of Unbelief. It is important that this not be confused with the Curse of Unbelief, which is a completely different affliction, in particular a virulent strain of plague spread by the chaos god Nurgle, which is known as a zombie plague in the 41st millennium. The Plague of Unbelief found its resolution in the extraordinary sacrifice of Saint Dolan Croestus, also known as the Great Confessor. Croesus willingly gave his life on Gathamor, his martyrdom serving as a beacon of unifying and unwavering faith in the Emperor. This act of devotion galvanized the planet's population, leading them to overthrow Bucharos and re-establish imperial rule, thereby restoring the Orthodox faith in the God Emperor to this and many other sectors. The Fifth Black Crusade would then come in 723 M36. Once again led by Abaddon the Despoiler. This devastating incursion into the Imperium of Mankind would become known by several monikers, such as Tide of Blood, the Scouring of Lycia, and the Black Crusade of Doombred. This campaign ravaged the Elysia sector as Abaddon's forces stormed hundreds of worlds, leaving a trail of death and destruction in their wake. A particularly catastrophic episode would occur then on the world of Traith. Here, Abaddon would lure the Space Marine chapters of the Warhawks and Venters into the ruins of an ancient imperial city known as Luton, not to be confused with that Luton. Trapped between the demonic legions of Khorne and the heretic Astartes of the Black Legion, the two loyalist chapters made a final desperate stand. Their resistance, however, would prove futile, resulting in their annihilation as the ancient demon prince Doombred, whose existence predated the Imperium itself, claimed the skulls of the fallen warriors to mount upon Khorne's mighty throne. In 754 M36, the Imperium would face another great incident, this one known as the Web of Intrigue Disaster, an event that, due to how shrouded in secrecy it is more notable for the amount of secrecy surrounding it than anything else involving it, as it seems to have been purposely stricken from imperial records, leaving a blind gap only filled by a name. In the year 901 M36, the galaxy would be once again thrust into chaos with the launch of Abaddon's 6th Black Crusade. Once again, spearheaded by Abaddon the Despoiler, this massive incursion was of particular import due to Abaddon's target. In particular, he had targeted a faction within the Chaos Space Marines known as the Sons of the Eye. The Sons of the Eye were a notorious warband of Black Legion founded and commanded by the formidable Chaos Lord Deathkar, the Sightless, also known as the Blind Butcher of Iridius VII. Deathkar was a famed battle brother of the Sons of Horus who had once fought along Abaddon during the Great Crusade and the subsequent Horus Heresy, had just recently shown his deep-seated jealousy for Horus's favor towards Abaddon and his perceived usurpation of leadership within the Sons of Horus. During this 6th Black Crusade, Abaddon orchestrated an assault on a forge world of Arkreach, where the Black Legion would fight in concert with the Sons of the Eye. The coordinated attack would eventually overwhelm the Adeptus Mechanicus defenders. Yet, in a drastic turn of events, Abaddon would execute Deathkar in a ritualistic manner, using the Talon of Horus to inflict a slow and torturous death upon the Space Marine, whose own warband would be forcibly subjugated and subsumed by their new master and his troops. In 989 M36, as the Eye of Terror and other warp rifts across the galaxy visibly expanded, a pre-existing crisis emerged which involved the Golden Throne. The tech priests responsible for maintaining the Emperor's life support systems reported a dire need to increase the number of Psykers, which were tied to the continuance of the Astronomicon, due to its energies creating a backlash on the Golden Throne itself. The Emperor and the system's insatiable demand for psychic energy had to be met for the stability of the Astronomicon to continue. So, from here, the Black ships would finally be tasked with gathering the Imperium's Psyker tides with a significant increase in both numbers and frequencies in their voyages. By this period, records suggest that 4 times the usual number of Psykers would be sacrificed to the Golden Throne to maintain the operations of the Astronomicon's beacon. The following Age of Redemption was marked by a significant recovery for the Imperium, emerging from the shadows of the previous millennium's tumult. During this period, the Imperial cult surged in zeal and fervor, as heretic pyres blazed relentlessly across thousands of Imperial worlds. Due to this, the populace sought to atone for their sins through the relentless persecution of those deemed as heretical. The Imperium would then undertake a series of relentless crusades led by the Adeptus Astartes and other military forces. These campaigns aimed to reclaim lost territories and counteract the threats posed by Chaos and the Orcs, along with other xenos adversaries at the time, including both the Eldari and the Drukhari. During this time, fervent devotion to the Emperor would reach its zenith, leading to an era of expansive, though often excessively prolonged, crusades. Intense focus on religious zeal and zealotry, along with expansion, would leave many sectors inadequately defended, as Imperial resources, including Space Marine chapters and Astra Militarum regiments, were drawn into ever lengthier and more destructive campaigns. This period of fanatical devotion to the Emperor would then leave a profound mark in the Imperium's history, underscoring their enduring and eternal struggle between faith and survival. Then, in the year 10 M37, a cataclysmic event known as the Wrath of the Chaos Sun erupted, casting a pall over the entirety of the Imperium. The catastrophe began with the violent detonation of the red giant star at the heart of the Maxil Beta system. This explosion unleashed a massive cloud of warp flame that swept across a vast swath of the galaxy. The devastation thereby was rather profound, as entire worlds were either transformed into grotesque abominations or possessed by the malevolent entities of the Neverborn. In response to this unprecedented threat, the High Lords of Terra mobilized all available Imperial forces with urgency, including the Grey Knights who were pressed to serve alongside over a dozen Space Marine chapters, along with numerous Imperial Guard regiments and the emerging Orders Militant of the Adeptus Sororitas, which were all summoned to confront this dire crisis as a united force, whose overall power was tantamount to that bared by the Primarchs during the days of the Legions. The resulting conflict not only stemmed the immediate threat, but also played a crucial role in mending the rifts within Imperial policy, which had been deeply scarred by Gouge Van Dyer's betrayal during the Reign of Blood. By the year 20 M37, the High Lords of Terra initiating a sweeping and ruthless purge within the bureaucracy of the Adeptus Terra, the governing body focused on Terra itself. The operation known as the Great Cull was designed to eradicate any remnants of corruption and ensure that all the grievous errors tied with the faith witnessed during the Reign of Blood would never again occur. This purge targeted the tainted elements within the Imperial administration across various worlds simultaneously, with a precision that is quite honestly awe-inspiring, reinforcing the Imperium's commitment to preserving its spiritual and political integrity evermore. The Age of Redemption was also marked with several significant conflicts, including the Abyssal Crusade and the Osculad War. The Abyssal Crusade began in 321 M37, which was triggered by Saint Belisius, who had, for some reason, discovered that there were 30 Space Marine chapters whose devotion to the Emperor was deemed lacking by his metrics. The penitent chapters would then be made to embark on a crusade into the Eye of Terror, seeking redemption through their efforts to reclaim the worlds seized by the birth of Slaanesh. Their mission was both a test of fate and a desperate attempt to purge corruption from the human-settled worlds that were now under the sway of chaos. The Osculad War, on the other hand, commencing in 555 M37, was ignited by the havoc wrought by the Apostles of the Blind King. These heretical tech priests, who viewed humanity as an affront to the machine god, wielded devastating technologies from the Dark Age of technology and used it to terraform ordinary stars into supernovas, thereby destroying human-settled systems without remorse and incredibly efficiently. Their campaign resulted in the extermination of human life across almost the entirety of the outer Segmentum Obscurus. The war would go on to rage for a solar decade until navigator Jor Makan uncovered the palace warship of the Blind King, concealed within a fold of the warp. Armed with this vital intelligence, the navigator would guide his imperial warship named Dominus Astra to the palace and directly attacked this hidden location. The Blind King would be slain when the Dominus Astra lance batteries pierced the palace warship's hull. Without their leader and his psychic foresight, the Apostles would be quickly defeated, and their apocalyptic weapons secured and quickly hidden deep within the vaults of Mars. And as it just so happens, the crusade that was sent into the warp ended up being a ruse by a chaos-corrupted saint. In the 37th millennium, the Benedictine War erupted as a war of faith, focusing the fervent efforts of the Imperium on the Benedictine sector. This extensive campaign would be headed by the Black Templars chapter and 5 orders militant of the Adeptus Sororitas, and although it was supported by numerous forces of the God Emperor, these 2 military forces were the premier weapons of faith and fury that humanity had set out. The conflict was marked by the capture of several Eldari worlds, and the ferocity of the battles resulted in the rapid deaths of 2 Black Templar High Marshals. Despite these significant losses, the Ecclesiarch would intervene, declaring that the war's objectives had been sufficiently achieved and ordering its cessation. Nonetheless, High Marshal Constantine of the Black Templars would also perish during this campaign. Under his leadership, the Black Templars alone would continue their efforts and successfully expelled the xenos from the remaining worlds in this subsector. By 754 M37, a widespread movement advocating for more enlightened and tolerant treatment of the galactic neighbors of humanity began to gain traction across thousands of planets. This was popularly known as the Children's Crusade. This movement, characterized by youthful favor and idealistic promises, attracted billions of pilgrims. These followers would then seek transport to Terra, believing it to be the gateway to their envisioned utopia. However, many of these pilgrims would be intercepted by pirates or would disappear into the warp, leading to their collective designation as the Lost Crusade. This tragic exodus highlights the perilous nature of so many people seeking to traverse the galaxy all at once, even with the best of intentions. And so, this crusade, this hope for peace and unity within the galaxy, died out without a second thought. Later would come the Seventh Black Crusade, referred to as the Ghost War, commencing in 811 M37, under the command of the notorious Chaos Lord, Abaddon the Despoiler, as if he'd allow anyone else to lead a Black Crusade. This incursion emerged from the Eye of Terror and was marked by a sudden and overwhelming eruption of chaos forces that would initially sweep past Cadia itself before vanishing. The elusive nature of this campaign earned it the moniker of the Ghost War. Over the following years, a chaotic game of hide-and-seek ensued between the forces of chaos and the Imperium within this sector, fostering widespread confusion and paranoia along with large amounts of disinformation being spread out throughout the galaxy. Though chaos raids were rather frequent and disruptive in the region, the Dark God servants eventually would be forced once again to retreat into the Eye of Terror. Their retreat signified a failure to inflict lasting damage unlike their prior crusades, only leaving some amount of discord and trepidation within the sector. In 956 M37, the Imperium would be once more shaken by the mysterious Hainfall Massacre. Detailed records of this massacre remain shrouded by secrecy within Imperial records, but what is known is that a widespread surge of atrocities were committed in short order to a point that even the Night Lords would blush at the massacres. The next major event within the galaxy would be the 8th Black Crusade, once again by Abaddon, in 999 M37. What was significant was the devastating incursion from the Eye of Terror deep into the Imperial space. During this campaign, Abaddon executed a series of ritualistic massacres known as Skullgother, which invoked the dark favor of Tzeentch, the Changer of Ways. The campaign itself involved a series of meticulously planned massacres across worlds in the Segmentum Obscurus, and as Imperial citizens were slaughtered in very precise and rather obtuse ritualistic numbers, their death would be orchestrated in a manner that would appease Tzeentch's desires. It was only after the Inquisition cracked a complex code underlying these rituals that the Imperium could formulate a counter to the Black Legion's destructive rampage. By then, however, countless worlds had already been drenched in blood, and Abaddon's aim of gaining Tzeentch's eternal favor was achieved, even with a large loss of his forces. In 112 M38, the survivals of the aforementioned Abyssal Crusade, having purged over 400 worlds within the Eye of Terror, returned to Imperial space. Their triumphant return was overshadowed by a dramatic series of events, where Chapter Master Korvac Lon of the Vorpal Swords condemned the ancient Saint Basius as a false idol, asserting that the veneration of him was tantamount to treachery against the God Emperor. In a swift and ruthless campaign, every shrine and sepulchre dedicated to Saint Belisius would be destroyed. The saint's remains, alongside his invaluable records and thousands of his remaining followers, were consigned to a derelict bulk freighter and cast into a nearby star, eradicating all traces of that which was deemed as heretical worship by the few returning loyalist chapters. The following period of time was known as the Waning, which stretched between M38 to 744 M41, and it represents one of, if not the darkest chapters in Imperial history. Exhausted by relentless Imperial crusades during the Age of Redemption, the Imperium saw a collapse of many of its military's efficacy. Star systems seemed to fall prey more constantly to orc invasions, chaos insurgencies, and the disgusting xenos infestation, along with outright rebellion. As anarchy would spread throughout the Imperium, the Administratum increasingly delegated more and more independence and control to Space Marine chapters, recognizing their unparalleled military strength as crucial for restoring order in these lawless regions of the galaxy. The Adeptus Terra would respond to the escalating chaos with increasingly stringent regulations and severe punishments, all the while allowing Space Marines more freedom and control over these sectors. Amidst this turmoil, portents of doom proliferated as prophets spoke of ominous and oncoming disturbances in the warp, likened to a vast but hidden menace stirring the cosmic waters. This period would be marked by both internal strife and external threats. Eventually, the Ninth Black Crusade would occur. Spearheaded once again by their leader Abaddon, the Black Legion would emerge from the Eye of Terror in 537 M38, and their primary objective was the fortress world of Cancophilos. But the campaign quickly escalated into a devastating conflict with the neighboring world of Antarchans. Over the course of 7 years, the war inflicted severe losses on both the Antachans and the Caliphs, depleting their most vital resource, manpower. With the naval fleets of both worlds incapacitated due to a lack of manpower, Abaddon was free to ravage the sector with unrestrained ferocity. His sorcerers, unopposed, conducted their dark rituals, wreaking havoc on the fabric of reality in that region of space, and facilitating further incursions later on. In 666 M38, the Imperium witnessed something that they would come to refer to as the Grim Harvest, a disturbing event marked by the arrival of an armada of grotesquely mutated space hulks, drifting out of the warp near Terra itself. Amongst these derelict vessels were some of the identified remnants of the Lost Crusade. The Lost Crusade, driven by disillusioned menials and youths yearning for a more tolerant galaxy, had resulted in billions of pilgrims seeking transport to Terra. As many were intercepted by pirates, others would just vanish into the warp and be collectively possessed by mutant genetic aberrations and become possessed demon hosts. Their arrival right near Terra and their attack on the most holy world of Terra would quickly lead the Inquisition to suppress as much knowledge of the Grim Harvest fleet along with its abominable cargo to maintain the fallout of this unsettling discovery from ever reaching the ears of its citizenry. Eventually, Abaddon would once again rear his head in his 10th Black Crusade, also known as the Conflict of Helsia, this time led not only by Abaddon the Despoiler, but with the aid and in concert of the demon primarch known as Perturabo, Lord of the Iron Warriors. This campaign struck against the Helisa sector, as the Black Legion targeted its capital world, Thrican Primus, while the Iron Warriors waged a brutal assault on the world of Medusa, the homeworld of the Loyalist Iron Hands chapter, as Perturabo sought to settle an old blood debt, leading a series of vicious sieges that nearly annihilated the long-standing Loyalist chapter of the Iron Hands. Only with substantial Imperial reinforcements did the Loyalist forces manage to repel these attacks. Unfortunately, Abaddon and Perturabo, having gathered crucial intelligence on Medusa's defenses, would retreat back into the Eye of Terror, leaving the sector scarred but not defeated, all the while biding their time for their future endeavors. From 392 to 399 M41, the galaxy witnessed the Macarian Crusade, an extraordinary campaign spearheaded by the mortal human lord Solar Macarius, the illustrious leader of Segmentum Solar. Macarius assembled the largest ever human army since the Great Crusade, and embarked on a monumental conquest that reclaimed thousands of worlds scattered across the western reaches of the Imperium's space. In a mere 7 years, Macarius was able to bring light to the furthest, darkest sectors of the galaxy, where the Emperor's presence had long been unknown. His achievements earned him immense reverence, and his death was mourned across the Imperium. Yet his legacy was marred by the subsequent Macarian heresy, a period of fragmentation and strife which ensued in the wake of his conquests. Over the course of 70 years, the once unified territories would descend into fierce rivalries and civil wars. The Macarian heresy was ultimately quelled through the concerted efforts of 100 specially designated Space Marine chapters who would restore order and a semblance of structure to these fractured regions. In 541, the Imperium was once again shaken by a phenomenon known as the Tears of the Emperor. This event was marked by widespread visions and reports that claimed the Emperor was shedding tears across the galaxy, from remote feral worlds to densely populated hive worlds. An array of voices, holy men, street agitators, shamans, priests, mystics, and even the occasional child spoke of this divine occurrence. On feral worlds, primitives would interpret storm-laden skies as tears from their mighty gods. On the ecclesiarchy cardinal worlds, archdeacons and humble pilgrims alike reported seeing statues of the emperor weeping. In hive cities, chapter masters and common street urchins shared visions of the emperor stirring upon his golden throne, tears cascading from his sightless eyes. Despite the varied interpretations and manifestations of these visions, the unified message was clear. The emperor wept, not for his own suffering, but for the plight of humanity. As this collective vision would quickly become a powerful symbol of the ongoing struggle and plight which was perceived as divine sorrow. As the 41st millennium would slowly draw to a close, the Imperium of Man faced an unprecedented existential crisis known as a time of ending, and this era was marked by humanity's struggle for survival against a backdrop of relentless threats, trials, and tribulations. The Imperium was now besieged on all fronts by an unholy amalgamation of dangers, secessionist movements, rampant rebellions, persuasive chaos corruption, unrelenting heresy, along with those vile xenos. The galaxy now would see an influx of alien empires, both ancient and newly encountered: the Orcs, the Eldari, the Tau, the Necrons, and most alarmingly, the Tyranids would close in from every direction. Each of these xenos races represented a dire threat that challenged the already strained defenses of humanity. Within this grim context, zealous voices proclaimed that these invaders were divine retribution for humanity straying from the God Emperor's guidance. The proliferation of mutants and psychers was also cited as evidence of mankind's moral decline. As desperation mounted, messages of distress surged throughout the warp, as astropaths labored tirelessly to decode and interpret these transmissions, with included urgent pleas from planetary governors, cries for reinforcements from Astra Militarum officers, and alarming reports of enemy movements from fleet commanders. The Imperium's defenders, including the Space Marines and the Astra Militarum, were now set on an unending fight, which was fraught with unparalleled bravery, as they each strove to protect humanity from both internal decay and external threats. Despite their valor and their attempt to struggle to be omnipresent amidst the mounting crisis, the situation would worsen daily, as the increasing frequency of assaults upon the Imperium would continue to increase at a near geometric rate. Of particular concern were the persistent warnings of great disturbances within the warp, as if colossal and unseen forces were straining to breach the fabric of reality at a more constant rate. The next large event would be the Damocles Gulf Crusade, which occurred between 742 and 745 M41. This was a pivotal conflict marking the Imperium's first official bouts with the Tau Empire, initiated the Lithish sector of the Ultima Segmentum. During the late 41st millennium, this crusade was sparked by the concerns over alien contamination following the trade agreements between Tau, Watercast, and Imperial worlds on the edge of the Tau's territory. However, the campaign faced fierce resistance upon reaching the Tau-sept world of Daleth Prime. The formidable numbers and the advanced technologies that the Tau had wrought were bolstered by their Kroot allies, led to a protracted and bloody stalemate as the conflict would drag on for several solar months, with neither side making substantial gains. By late 742 M41, the prolonged fighting and mounting casualties led to the Crusade commanders to agree to peace talks with the Tau's Watercast. The negotiations culminated in the cessations of hostility, with the Imperial forces withdrawing from Tau space proper. The retreat was actually only done due to an imminent threat from Tyranid Fleet Behemoth, which loomed as a greater peril than the Tau could ever be, just upon the Imperium's horizon. In the year 744 M41, the shadow of impending doom would cast its first ominous sign through the prophecies of Thraga, the seer of Corinto. Thraga foretold of a cataclysmic period, ominously predicting that even the light of the Emperor would be engulfed by encroaching darkness. This grim vision would be named the Noctis Aeterna, a future epoch of profound obscurity. His revelations would be quickly deemed heretical by the Inquisition, and the visionary was quickly executed to suppress his foreboding messages. But despite the Inquisition's efforts to keep his prophecies concealed from the broader imperial populace, the seer's warnings resonated through the psychic networks of countless worlds throughout the human-settled galaxy. The year 745 M41 marked a pivotal moment in the galaxy's history, where the first official appearance of the Tyranids would be noted as a dangerous military force, hurdling the containment, heralding the commencement of the Tyrannic Wars. Hive Fleet Behemoth emerged from the void, laying waste to imperial star systems of Tyran, where it would gain its name from, and Thandros. This catastrophic invasion reached a zenith once Hive Fleet Behemoth descended upon the realm of Ultramar, the prestigious and glorious domain of the Ultramarines. The Battle for Macragge was a defining epoch within Ultramarines lore, and it unfolded as Hive Fleet Behemoth unleashed its devastation as the legendary chapter master Marneus Calgar would suffer grievous wounds at the hands of the monstrous Swarm Lord that led this campaign. Eventually, the valiant First Company of the Ultramarines would be annihilated in their final stand. Their sacrifice, however, allowed 2 Imperial Navy battle fleets to reach Macragge, just in time to halt the Tyranid onslaught proper. Yet the scars of this battle left the Imperial commanders across Ultima Segmentum with a sense of unease and foreboding. In 748 M41, the Blood Star campaign would erupt, triggered by the star Ares turning a sinister blood-red hue. This phenomena heralded the surge of demonic activity within the Scaris sector. The campaign was rather brutal and resulted in significant losses, including the deaths of chapter masters and fleet admirals of rather great import within Segmentum Obscurus. The Blood Star campaign would become known as one of the most harrowing episodes in Imperial records, marked by relentless chaos and devastation across Segmentum Obscurus. The Great Exodus would be the next major galactic event in 750 M41, beginning with a peculiar astronomical event, a swirling anomaly in the Agros system. This seemingly innocuous phenomena turned critical with the sudden appearance of 6 Eldari craft worlds. Before the Imperial fleet could respond, both the swirling mass and the Eldari vanished, leaving a trail of extinguished suns within a 60 light-year radius. In the wake of these events, the Imperium undertook the greatest evacuation efforts known to humankind. Imperial fleets and countless transports worked tirelessly to relocate billions of citizens, nigh trillions, to neighboring systems. By the campaign's end, it is estimated that approximately 12% of the region's population and 32% of its heavy industry would be successfully evacuated, leaving an unbelievable amount of death and destruction in their wake. The remnants of the Exodus, a ring of dead planets and stars, would forever become known as the Dead Hinge, which became a treacherous haven for salvagers and pirates alike. In 757 M41, the galaxy would witness the horrifying emergence of the zombie plague on the world of Hydra Minoris. This virulent outbreak of the undead, driven by the malign influences of Nurgle, engulfed this planet in a nightmarish crisis, as the Imperial Navy was forced to swiftly enforce a quarantine, trapping 23 billion uninfected souls alongside the ever-growing legion of mindless, soulless, ravenous undead. This grim measure aimed to contain the plague's spread, but the dire situation highlighted that chaos was more active than ever now, and new countermeasures would have to be created quickly, and the Imperium did not have the time to do so. The years between 766 and 795 M41 would be marked by escalating troubles with the Eldari, as their conflicts would become more and more constant. In 766 M41, Eldari pirates led by the notorious and well-known Yrel launched a series of devastating attacks upon Imperial watch stations and listening posts within the Katachan system and the Ryaz system. The loss of critical early warning outposts would then leave the systems perilously exposed to subsequent threats. By year 783 M41, the Eldari Asciani from Craftworld Ulthwain inflicted further damage upon Imperial planets when they obliterated an Adeptus Mechanicus explorator fleet above the dead world of Midrax. Despite their devastating assault, the Asciani's destruction was not complete, as probes would be released and a distress signal was sent before the fleet's full annihilation. The situation grew more dire as a cadre of Marines from the noble Blood Angels 3rd Company arrived at the site of the fleet's disappearance, and they quickly found themselves ensnared in a fierce conflict between Ulthwain's forces and the Necrons, who had been inadvertently awakened on Meridrax surface by the presence of those now upon it. Later, the Canador Rebellion would erupt in 795 M41, posing a significant threat to the stability of the Imperium. However, the uprising would quickly be quelled by the 23rd Cadian Regiment's forces, though not without a considerable cost to lives. Several chaos cults, including the followers of the Shining Deity, the Cult of the Many Tentacles, and the Red-Robed Brotherhood, were implicated in this rebellion. These groups had not been seen since the Fourth Quadrant Rebellion, eons ago, and suggested a resurgence of the dark and dangerous influences of the warp upon real space. In 797 M41, Segmentum Ultima faced a formidable threat from a massive orc invasion, which threatened to coalesce into a colossal Wag, as the Imperium's forces were once more stretched to their limits, struggling to maintain the numerous simultaneous war zones. Amongst the notable acts of valor which occurred during this time was Chapter Master Calgar of the Ultramarines holding the gate for a grueling 24 hours against a relentless greenskin horde, all on his lonesome, during the siege of Xalathos. Additionally, the 2nd Company of the Ultramarines executed a devastating campaign, utterly destroying War Boss Brug's planetary stronghold. These actions led the Imperium to survive against overwhelming odds. In 801 M41, a brief but ominous disruption in the Astronomicon occurred, as a beacon which was used to guide ships through the warp faltered for some unknown reason, leading to the loss of thousands of vessels and the loss of uncountable human lives, marking a rare and unsettling failure in the Astronomicon's efficiency, which suggested a troubling decline in the Emperor's influence and the possibility of a weakening of his divine power. The next major event is a rather well-known one, the Siege of Rax, occurring between 813 and 830 M41. The protracted conflict known as the Siege of Rax was a rather grim occurrence, which occurred when apostate Cardinal Xiphon allied the armory world of Rax Prime with the ruinous powers. The arrival of the Imperial forces would eventually suppress this rebellion, though not without fierce resistance, escalating into a full-scale war over 7 long years. The campaign would culminate in the devastating demonic incursions and the intervention of the Ordo Malleus and the Grey Knights. Unfortunately, this proved insufficient to prevent the complete devastation of Rax. By the campaign's end, the world would be rendered uninhabitable, and its entire population would be exterminated in order to stem the tides of chaos. In 822 M41, Abaddon the Despoiler once again launched a raid, this time on the Eldari maiden world of Illandra, in search of a long-lost Chaos artifact. Unfortunately for him, his forces were repelled by the Ultratic Craft World, who defended their world with a considerable might, one which Abaddon seemingly was not prepared for. While this raid might have appeared minor amongst the broader galactic conflicts, its implications reverberated and would later echo in the ongoing struggles between the Imperium and Chaos. By 853 M41, the Kandor III system, previously thought to be secured after an uprising had been quelled over 50 years earlier, experienced a resurgence in rebellion. The renewed incursion was fueled by mutants, psychers, and chaos cultists, which quickly overtook the planet's surface. City by city, Chaos Space Marines, demonic entities, and mutants captured key orbital and lunar defense systems. In response, 3 Space Marine chapters, led by the Imperial Fists, conducted a strategic operation to salvage critical resources, Imperial artifacts, and a few of the Adeptus Administratum officials before executing a rare exterminatus. The only survivor of Kandor III were the 42 Astra Militarum regiments, which had been on their way to be deployed to other war zones before the uprising began. Later would occur the St. Cecilia Massacre in 863 M41, which was marked by a profound betrayal. The Adamant Fury Titan Legion, once stalwart defenders of the Emperor, would fall to chaos, turning their formidable firepower against loyal regiments of the St. Cecilian Planetary Defense Forces. The Titan Legion's defection and subsequent escape off-world sent shockwaves throughout the Imperium, as the Mechanicus and its Collegia Titanica invested significant resources into tracking down and destroying this renegade Titan Legion with a vengeance, rather having these god machines destroyed than in the hands of the traitorous Dark Mechanicum. In 876 M41, the world of Van Horn was engulfed in an apocalyptic event termed as the Blood Tide by the Inquisition, as the bloodthirster Kragjargar, Lord of the Blood Tide, shattered his infernal bonds and unleashed a cataclysmic tide of war that tainted and corrupted everything it touched. For 8 relentless days and nights, a horrific spree of bloodshed attracted every demonic entity from the warp to this single spot, as the boundary between the Materium and the Immaterium would be disintegrated, leading the Grey Knights' 4th Brotherhood to arrive and at great cost to themselves drive the Bloodthirster back into the warp. And with their efforts, the psychic backlash eradicated the Blood Tide and the demons he had summoned. Unfortunately, the damage inflicted upon Von Horn was profound, leaving the planet permanently within ruin. The next major galactic event which would take place was the Battle of Planus Stepus in 883 M41. One of the most significant armored engagements since the Battle of Talran would occur. Led by Knight Commander Fask, the 423rd Cadian Regiment would spearhead an assault involving over 8,000 Imperial tank companies, 35 super heavy tank detachments, alongside a near endless amount of menials and foot soldiers. This engagement resulted in the near annihilation of the renegade Adamant Fury Traitor Titan Legion, which showcased the devastating firepower the Imperium still held. Another major event which happened shortly thereafter was the Crusade of Wrath, commencing in 888 M41, which saw the Black Templars chapter dealing a heavy blow to the Word-Bearers Traitor Legion. Through relentless campaigns, the Black Templars reclaimed several star systems previously lost to the Maelstrom. This victory marked a notable resurgence for the Imperium in a time fraught with turmoil. Then would come the Long Midnight, which occurred in 891 M41, which brought terror to the worlds of Persia as Eldari corsairs descended upon them. These raiders shrouded their targets in impenetrable darkness while they committed widespread pillaging and slaughter. The devastating raids continued unchecked until the Praxian Patrol arrived, restoring a semblance of order to the ravaged worlds. In 897 M41, the fortress world, known as Sanctuary 101, would fall to the Necrons, in a devastating assault. This brutal attack caused the Imperium to have a staggering realization about the true threat that were the Necrons and their formidable forces, which marked them as a grave danger to humanity. That same year, the emergence of Hive Fleet Gorgon occurred, which would become a new and great threat to the galaxy. This Tyranid menace was detected by the Imperial outposts advancing through the burgeoning Tau Empire's eastern fringe. The Tau, who were unprepared for the impending invasion, would receive no warning, leaving them vulnerable to the alien menace. Shortly thereafter, the Badab War would commence in 901 M41, which began when Luft-Hieron, chapter master of the Astral Claws, defied the Imperium by withholding the chapter's gene seed due to him not having the resources, and followed the command his chapter was given to protect the sector properly, eventually leading into him declaring a secession of the system and gaining the moniker the Tyrant of Badab. The ensuing 12-year conflict devastated shipping lanes in the Maelstrom Zone and embroiled over a dozen Space Marine chapters. Despite the eventual fall of Badab Primus to loyalist forces, Luft-Hieron and the Astral Claws would flee into the Maelstrom, where they rebranded themselves as the Red Corsairs. Luft-Hieron would now become known as Blackheart, and he would transform them into some of the most feared and effective pirates and raiders that the Imperium would ever contend with. By 907 M41, Orc Wag activity actively surged across all 5 segmentums of the Imperium simultaneously, prompting a significant redeployment of forces. In particular, the Nova Marines, the Raptors, the Howling Griffins would be withdrawn from Badab to address the intensifying Greenskin menace, highlighting the significant shifting of focus and military priorities. Later would occur the sack of Jolana, which occurred in 913 M41, as the disciples of the Thousand Sons, Chaos Sorcerer Ahriman, conducted a devastating raid on the Librarium located on the world of Jolana. This attack led to the complete destruction of the Librarium, underscoring the ongoing perils that the old Traitor Legions still posed. In 920 M41, Aldari pirates started launching brazen attacks on the advanced escort fleet of black ships which emerged from warp space in the Thanos system in a perfectly balanced, coordinated attack. As the pirates succeeded in destroying 3 frigates and capturing the troop ship Emperor's Faithful, seizing a substantial contingent of Astra Militarum and Imperial Navy personnel. The subsequent vulnerability of the black ships led to further raids, exacerbating the Imperium's challenges in maintaining the defensive operations and ensuring the safety of their personnel. In 925 M41, a Necron world engine would be unmasked as the architect behind the catastrophic destruction of the Divider sector. This colossal construct of death and devastation was eventually brought down, largely due to the heroic sacrifice of the Astral Knights chapter, as their ultimate sacrifice ensured the world engine's obliteration at the cost of the entirety of the remaining chapter. Later would come the Vaxilhan genocide in 926 M41, where Chaos Space Marines known as the Purge perpetuated an atrocity within Valaxia, murdering over 14 billion Imperial citizens and claiming the planet as their own. It must be noted that this was a crucial astropath relay hub for Imperial forces and an Imperial fortress world within the Hercules system, which was seized and defiled by the Profane, marking a grievous blow against the Imperium's defenses. By 937 M41, Inquisitor Phalanx spearheaded a significant military operation to reclaim 9 hollow worlds from the grasp of Chaos Lord Luft-Hieron Blackheart and his Red Corsairs warband, commanding 5 companies of Space Wolves alongside units from the 301st Cadian and the 14th Talran Astra Militarum regiments. Phalanx's forces were confronted with the astonishing extent of the Red Corsairs' expansion and the vastness of their pirate empire, marking them as a great threat equivalent to the Black Crusades. Eventually, the Second War for Armageddon would commence in 941 M41, when the formidable orc warlord Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Draka led an unprecedented Wag against the Hive world of Armageddon, a planet of rather notable strategic significance in Segmentum Solar. The conflict saw the orcs ultimately repelled by the relentless defenders of the planet, and the combined efforts of 3 fully armed and equipped Space Marine chapters, alongside the legendary valor of the great and esteemed Commissar Yark. Although the orcs were defeated, Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Draka escaped, vowing to return in the future for a greater Wag. In 963 M41, the Imperium proper encountered a new threat when the Ultramarines clashed with a Tau expeditionary fleet over the cursed planet of Malbed. The conflict inadvertently would awaken the Necron tomb worlds which lay beneath the surface. In a rare moment of collaboration, the Tau and the Ultramarines formed a temporary and vile alliance to combat the emerging Necron threat. After their victory, Chapter Master Marnius Calgar of the Ultramarines declared an exterminatus on the world. However, he allowed the Tau, for some reason, to evacuate before the planet's destruction, as he obliterated the planet, triggering a brief but unsettling surge in unknown energies across multiple planets, sparking fears of a myriad of awakening tomb worlds. As the Imperium now noted the dual threat of the expanding Tau Empire, driven by a pursuit of the vague greater good, and the reawakening of the Necrons, seeking to restore their ancient domain. In 969 M41, the ancient starship Blade of Eternity re-emerged in the Kando system. However, upon closer inspection, it was revealed to be the dreaded Death Guard ship Terminus Est. The arrival of this vessel heralded the spread of the zombie plague across the system, as the infected refugees carried the virulent contagion far beyond the fleet's own designated areas of influence. Later, in 973 M41, a violent warp storm disturbed the dreams of countless individuals across the galaxy. For those sensitive to psychic disturbances, the storm proved to be catastrophic, as nightmarish visions breached the barriers between real space and the warp, resulting in the deaths of numerous psychers and the creation of rifts between the immaterium and reality. Though the storm was brief, it caused significant damage and seeded widespread corruption throughout the Imperium. In 975 M41, the bloodthirster known as Skarbrand materialized on the Cadius fortress world of Lutrus Epsilon. His unrestrained fury spread an aura of madness across the battlefield, causing Imperial guardsmen to turn upon each other in a frenzy of bloodlust. The planet's fortifications would quickly be drenched in blood, and the planet would be condemned as cursed forevermore, as Lutrus Epsilon was now classified as a quarantined forbidden world by the Inquisition, shrouded in secrecy and dread. In the year 976 M41, a massive orc invasion would occur, which caused the devastation of the western sector of the Ultima Segmentum. Although the orcs failed to seize the forge world of Ryza, the surrounding sectors suffered extensive damage and disruption in their activity, which further highlighted the growing threat and aggression of the orcs. In 989 M41, the orc Snagrod would launch a ferocious assault on Rin's world, nearly annihilating the esteemed Crimson Fist's Space Marine chapter's unforeseen accident destroyed the fortress monastery proper, compounding their disaster. However, Imperial forces were able to retake the Agri world by 991 M41, and the Crimson Fists were given the arduous process of rebuilding. Despite having driven off the orc forces, Chapter Master Pedro Cantor chose to focus on restoration rather than pursuing the orcs, as Snagrod would escape to continue his rampage across the sector. In 992 M41, Eldari forces launched an assault on the Cadian holdings of Varulent. The Eldar were decisively defeated despite their more advanced technology due to the tactical brilliance of Lord Castellan Creed, who successfully repelled the attackers and preserved the planet's defenses. Eventually, the Tyranids would rear their ugly heads once again. In 993 M41, marking the onset of the Second Tyrannic Wars, as Hive Fleet Kraken descended upon the galaxy, and the Ultramarines, having just quelled the rebellion on the industrial world of Iker IV, found themselves on the front lines against their formidable adversaries. Luckily for the Imperium, craft world Iyanden suffered the devastation from tendrils of Hive Fleet Kraken, potentially delaying its assault on Imperial forces by hours, if not days. The Scythes of the Emperor chapter, alongside the Lamentor Space Marine chapters, would nearly be obliterated, and hundreds of Imperial worlds would be lost before the tyrannic incursion would be finally halted. By 997 M41, the galaxy faced a new and unprecedented threat as Hive Fleet Leviathan emerged from intergalactic space. This formidable Hive Fleet struck a blow from below the galactic plane, inflicting catastrophic disruption across the Segmentum Tempestus, Ultima, and Solar. The scale of this invasion revealed that the previous Tyranid incursions were merely preliminary probes. Imperial forces raced to confront this threat, leaving many sectors vulnerable to other enemies. In 221.997 M41, the world of Princia IV was invaded by the Orcs under the joint command of Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Draka and the Bad Moon's war boss, Nazdreg. Utilizing advanced teleportation technology which functioned better than it should have, the Orcs launched a surprise assault as a stout defense was orchestrated by Master Belial of the Dark Angels, coupled with timely reinforcements, would ultimately repel this threat. However, despite this victory, Imperial commanders, including Belial, would become wary of the continuing presence of Ghazghkull and his potential future schemes. In 509.997 M41, the Ultramarines and the Mortifactor Space Marine chapters faced a crucial battle against elements of Hive Fleet Leviathan on Tassus Ultra. The defenders employed a genetically engineered biological plague to defeat this particular tendril, but the Hive Fleet's overall advance would continue uninhibited, demonstrating the great threat that the Hive Fleet itself had become. In 977.997 M41, the Tau Empire embarked on its third sphere expansion, seizing control over a half a dozen Imperial worlds near the Damocles Gulf on the eastern fringe. Several other worlds would voluntarily join the Tau as Guevesa, aligning themselves with the Tau's greater good. The conflict with the Tau saw periods of escalation and lull, with the xenos forces showing no signs of retreating despite mounting Imperial resistance. In 998 M41, Hive Fleet Leviathan's relentless advance towards the Blood Angels chapter homeworld of Baal compelled the Blood Angels to act decisively, as they mobilized the defense of the Cryptus system, a crucial strategic bastion known as the Krypton Shield, for its role in safeguarding Baal itself. Faced with the overwhelming Tyranid threat, the Blood Angels were forced into an unlikely alliance with the Necrons of the Mefrit dynasty, and together they would eventually unleash an Exterminatus-class weapon, the Magna Gravitum, upon the system. This ancient Necron device ignited the core of a gas giant known as Eros, creating a miniature supernova that eradicated the Tyranids within this segment of the system. However, this costly victory came at the expense of numerous Imperial lives, and while it did halt the advance of Hive Fleet Leviathan, it would continue towards Baal, as it seemed that this segment of the Hive Fleet gained a particular consciousness and identity through the hate of the Red Armored Space Marines. By 757.998 M41, Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Draka would once again return to Armageddon with a formidable force of Orcs, in a Wag that would become known as the Third War for Armageddon. Having refined the teleportation technology through previous campaigns, Ghazghkull initiated a series of devastating assaults against the Imperial defenders. In response, the Imperium deployed massive forces and called upon Space Marine chapters who were nearby for support. The conflict would evolve into a protracted battle of attrition. Disillusioned by the stagnating siege, Ghazghkull would eventually leave his minions to finish the fight, while he sought to conquer neighboring worlds. Commissar Yarrick and the Black Templars would vow to bring the Orc Warlord to justice, as the Black Templars themselves would follow the Orc Warlord in a relentless pursuit across the sector. Eventually, the Octarius War would commence in 7/18/999 M41 as Hive Fleet Leviathan launched a massive invasion of the Orc Empire within the Octarius system. This was in part due to the Imperium's attempt to stagnate both forces, using the Orcs and the Tyranids as a means to control each other, igniting what would become known as the Octarius Wars. The ensuing conflict between the Orcs and the Tyranids created a brutal stalemate, with neither force ever showing signs of conceding, as Imperial Navy scout patrols monitored the battle and would ever so subtly tilt things every so often to maintain the stalemate, recognizing that should either side gain a complete upper hand, the Imperium would be ill-prepared to confront the victor of the sector in a sector-wide struggle. In 844-999 M41, the Dark Angels 5th Company would clash with the Crimson Slaughter Chaos Space Marine Warband over control of the Hellfire Stone, an artifact of great and significant importance which could potentially turn the tide of the galaxy. The confrontation took part in and nearly shook apart the Nephilim sector, as these bitter foes engaged in a ferocious battle as each side was determined to seize their prize. By 975.999 M41, the Astronomicon, the guiding light of the Imperium, began to dim noticeably, as contact with key systems such as Ultima Monarchia, Macragge, and Cypra Mundi became intermittent. Some Imperial scholars would attribute this decline to the disruptions amongst the Black ships, while others would blame the failing systems of the Golden Throne, and feared the weakening influence of the Emperor's mighty power. Eventually, time would pass, and through a rather disgusting deal with the Drukhari, there would be a temporary patch. In 978.999 M41, Drukhari raiders launched a devastating assault on the Imperial Navy moorings at Baka. The raid crippled critical naval infrastructure, leading to numerous Imperial star systems to be vulnerable to further Drukhari raids. Later would come the Battle of Chigoris. In 980.999 M41, the Red Corsairs, led by Luftiran Blackheart, executed a major raid from the Maelstrom to the Yasan sector. Their assault targeted Chigoris, Kalos, Grulti, Thrax, and the Sex system. Reports suggested that Huron Blackheart's forces had grown in size, comparable to that of the Space Marine legions of antiquity, as he wielded a level of military force not seen since the days of the Heresy, potentially even outstripping those available to Abaddon the Despoiler. In 982.999 M41, the Great Awakening occurred as a surge of psychic activity, in no small part influenced by Magnus the Red, awakened dormant psychers across the Imperium, as this psychic upheaval triggered a wave of warp rifts, leading to the loss of thousands of worlds to demonic incursions and widespread chaos. In 987.999 M41, the Necrons would initiate a series of attacks on the Cryptosegmentum system, marking the first recorded Necron assault within a mere 2,000 light-years of Terra. This incursion quickly highlighted the danger and the growing threat that the Necrons posed to Holy Terra and the Imperium as a whole. In 989.999 M41, the Ultramarines' 3rd Company would succeed in liberating the Logon system from the Tau Empire's disgusting control during the War of the Rising Suns. Despite this victory, several key worlds in the neighboring Domac system would capitulate to the Tau without resistance, joining their expansive empire in support of the greater good. In 990.999 M41, the devastation on the Octarius Belt unfolded, as the Eldari from Beltan and Siam Han craft worlds launched a series of assaults on worlds surrounding the Octarius system. Their objective was to deny Hive Fleet Leviathan access to crucial biological resources. Among the affected worlds were those colonized by humans of the Imperium, further escalating the conflict between humanity and the Eldari. the broader implications of these incidents has not yet been seen. In 992.999 M41, the Imperium would be besieged by an unprecedented wave of insurrections known as the Night of Thousand Rebellions. This cataclysmic surge in uprisings spread like wildfire across countless planets, engulfing both remote outposts and once secured worlds such as Enceladus, Drakhold, and Minestora. The chaos was so pervasive that even the homeworlds of the Alliance-defined Space Marine chapters would succumb to anarchy. This was instigated by secretive cults and frenzied agitators, as the upheaval severed communications between Terra and the vast region of Segmentum Pacificus, plunging the sector into a state of confusion and disorder not seen for a long time. In 993.999 M41, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica faced a crisis of unparalleled magnitude, as the galaxy was now inundated with constant, desperate astropathic distress signals. Yet Segmentum Pacificus seemed to remain eerily silent. The overwhelming psychic surge caused severe casualties amongst astropaths, with entire astropathic choirs fully succumbing to either madness or death, be it self-inflicted or otherwise, as their minds shattered under the strain. The catastrophic breakdown in Imperial communications exacerbated the anarchy even further, as the ceaseless psychic screams for aid echoed across the fabric of reality, highlighting a sense of impending doom upon which Imperials did not act in the best of mindsets. In 999 M41, the Thousand Suns Legion launched a devastating assault known as the Siege of the Fenris system. Their attack forced the Space Wolves to defend their homeworld, allowing Magnus the Red to extract his long-awaited revenge upon his brother's Legion. The Space Wolves would eventually be joined by their longtime rivals, the Dark Angels, and other Adeptus Astartes chapters, who were compelled to purge the entirety of the system of the Chaos Taint. Complicating matters was a devious plot by Tzeentch, which was fully orchestrated by the Changeling, which had somehow gotten into the Dark Angels' strongholds, which aimed to deceive the Dark Angels into believing that the Space Wolves had fallen to the ruinous powers and turned traitor. The conflict raged as unnatural foot soldiers from various Chaos factions joined the fray, as the Neverborn were allowed to step on land, which should never be allowed. Eventually, Magnus himself would emerge from the warp onto the surface of Fenris, tainting the world by his mere presence, confronting those who had once sought to execute his sons on Prospero. This battle, which included a demon Primarch, saw the fall of several Space Wolf, Dark Angel, and Grey Knight champions to Magnus's formidable psychic might. However, the Great Wolf, Logan Grimnar, would eventually manage to strike a crucial blow against the Crimson King, enabling the Grey Knights to perform the rites of banishment upon Magnus. Despite the repulsion of this invasion, the consequences would be profound, as the psychic agony of countless deaths reverberated through the Imperium, contributing to a ritual centuries in the making. The power drained from the Space Wolves world would fuel the violent resurgence of the Thousand Suns homeworld in the Eye of Terror, transforming it into a new and ominous celestial body orbiting the remnants of lost Prospero. The converging of new and old homeworlds around a singular cursed star has since become an ominous portent across the Imperium. It would be during 999 M41 that the Blood Angels would face an unprecedented trial. The tendrils of Hive Fleet Leviathan, having seemingly gained some form of identity, and despite being delayed by the events which had gone in the Cryptus campaign, was advancing directly towards Baal, ignoring many other viable targets which seemed uncharacteristic for the Tyranids. The situation would be further compounded by the return of the bloodthirster Kabanda from the warp, who launched an assault on Ammonai, which was the outermost planet of the Baal system. Confronted with a formidable war on multiple fronts, Lord Commander Dante mobilized a coalition of Imperial and non-human worlds to prepare for the impending invasion. This alliance, which encompassed former adversaries and allies all in one, would include the Great Silent King of the Necrons, Despite the shadow of untrustworthiness looming above their heads, the Blood Angels were faced with an uneasy choice. They could either accept this temporary alliance or welcome death with open arms. Eventually, the 13th Black Crusade would occur in 995.999 M41, as Abaddon the Despoiler, the War Master of Chaos, instigated the 13th Black Crusade, aiming to seize Cadia and the surrounding Cadian Gate. This audacious campaign was designed to breach straight to the heart of the Imperium for the first time since the Horus Heresy. The forces arrayed against the Imperium were rather formidable, including the Black Legion, the Death Guard, the World Eaters, and the Alpha Legions, along with the Thousand Sons and Night Lords. That and an alliance of Chaos Cultists, mutants, and a series of undeterminate demon princes, all combined for this assault. To this, the Imperium responded with the largest mobilization since the Horus Heresy, deploying colossal military forces in order to repel this assault. The conflict would escalate with Abaddon deciding to abandon his damaged Blackstone fortress, the Will of Eternity, and use it as an artificial meteorite to breach Cadia's defenses. Despite the valiant efforts of the Black Templars, Imperial Fists, Dark Angels, Space Wolves, Cadia, the keystone of the Cadian Gate defenses eventually fell, but the planet would break before the Guard did. The destruction of Cadia triggered a series of warp storms which would ripple throughout the galaxy, precipitating a mass exodus of Imperial forces even as battles continued to rage throughout the sector and on the remaining fragments of the planet. Amidst this chaos, the appearance of Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Cawl, along with the unexpected alliance of the mysterious Eldari faction known as the Ynnari, led to the reawakening of the Primarch Roboute Guilliman from his millennia-long stasis. As Guilliman re-entered the fray, he faced the immediate chaos by being assaulted by the Black Legion, led by Abaddon. Despite these formidable challenges, Guilliman succeeded in repelling the forces of chaos from Ultramar, though the conflict's far-reaching implications have still yet to unfold fully. Even as Cadia fell and a Primarch returned, the Tyrannid Hive Fleet of Leviathan and its tendrils continued towards Terra. Drawn by the Astronomicon's light and power in the warp, they advanced towards the heart of the Imperium. The valor of the Space Marines and the Inquisition would successfully manage to slow the Hive Fleet's advance, but ultimately they remained with a clear objective: reach Terra and devour all that stood between them. In 986-999 M41, the Adeptus Mechanicus uncovered a dire revelation. The mechanisms of the Golden Throne were failing, and the knowledge to repair this ancient technology was lost. Without intervention, the God Emperor would perish, leaving humanity to face the looming darkness all on its lonesome. Shortly after Cadia's fall, reality itself would be rent asunder, stretching from the Hardrex anomaly in the Jericho Reach to the furthest star system of Segmentum Obscurus. This catastrophic event, known as the Great Rift, unleashed warp storms unseen since the Age of Strife, cutting off the galactic north from Terra, ushering the era Indomitus. In the initial period, the Noctis Artrena, or Blackness, was marked by a complete halt in warp travel and astropathic communications, isolating countless Imperial worlds, having hundreds of planets succumbing to the ensuing chaos onslaught, as the Cicatrix Maledictum would spread like an impenetrable curtain, plunging the entire system into a great and terrible darkness. The chain reaction of warp cataclysms rippled across the galaxy, awakening further still latent psychers, triggering demonic incursions which consumed countless of civilizations, both those aligned with the Imperium and those not. For those on Terra's side of the rift, the Cicatrix Maledictum appeared as a tainted scar across the sky. For those in Imperium Nihilus, it was a gateway to hell, a gateway that would coincidentally allow for the salvation of the Blood Angels. The origins of how exactly the Great Rift was created includes theories of the Cadian Gate being a literal gate created by ancients, being broken by Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade, Magnus' sorcery somehow during the Thousand Sons invasion of the Fenris system, potentially cracking some fragment of reality culminating in the Great Rift forming, or a catastrophe in the Webway during the birth of Yanid, the Eldari god of the dead, or even the mass bloodshed in the Damocles Gulf. Some even speculate the resurrection of Roboute Guilliman itself brought upon this great and terrible event. The first warp storms to engulf Holy Terra would cause a rolling crimson to cut the sky to shreds, as Khorne, seeking to exert his dominance, dispatched 88 cohorts of demon legions to assault the Imperial Palace. Here the Blood God aimed to claim the glory of tearing down the Golden Throne himself, as the gun batteries of the Imperial Palace, unparalleled in their might, seemingly could not stem the red tide by their lonesome. Eventually, the forces of the Imperium, led by the newly appointed Lord Commander of the Imperium, Roboute Guilliman, alongside his Primaris Space Marine cohorts, and the Adeptus Custodes, along with the Sisters of Silence, fought side by side, repelling the Chaos Assault before it could reach the Eternity Gate. Yet even the High Lords of Terra would be shaken by the boldness of their enemies due to this assault. Without the Astronomicon's beam, their arcane machinery and protective devices were proven to be insufficient to rent the tide of the materialization of the felt powers on Holy Terra. In his rage at the failed assault, Khorne's outburst caused his fortress and the entirety of the realm of chaos to tremble, as the heat from his fury permanently obliterated the essences of the 8 bloodthirsters who led the attack. The Indomitus Crusade, which began in 999 M41 proper, would occur following Roboute Guilliman's valiant defense of Holy Terra. As he assembled a formidable armada, the Indomitus Crusade, a mighty force, which was the largest concentration of imperial military might since the original Great Crusade 10,000 years ago under the Emperor himself, would go underway. The crusade would even include elements of the Adeptus Custodes and a small contingent of the Silent Sisterhood, and a vast warhost of Primaris Space Marines who would later be used to found chapters and legions of what would become known as the Unnumbered Suns raged throughout the stars. Joining them were strike forces from over a dozen pre-existing Space Marine chapters, some of which were led by the Imperial Fists. As Guilliman traveled to beleaguered planets, he broke sieges and swept away chaos and xenos invaders, rekindling the hope amongst beleaguered defenders. Word of his deeds would quickly spread throughout the Imperium, in particular those who could still receive messages from the astropathic choirs. Once again, Guilliman would become a demigod of myth, who fought for the Imperium of Man. The Indomitus Crusade would conclude in over a century, as it went on to the 42nd millennium, at the Battle of Rakus. Following this, Guilliman turned his attention to aiding the realm of Ultramar in defeating the Death Guard Traitor Legion and Nurgle's servants in the Plague Wars. From this moment on, dates become rather nebulous, as records shift backwards and forwards. Eventually, the strategically vital worlds of Vigilus, which connected Imperium Nihilus and Imperium Sanctus through the Nakmund Gauntlet, which was one of the few stable passages throughout the Rift, would come under attack from multiple Xenos and Chaos forces, including the Black Legion under Abaddon the Despoiler, would launch attacks on these very vulnerable planets, in a conflict that would become known as the War of the Beasts, not to be confused with the War of the Beast, which occurred millennia prior. Although Abaddon's invasion was ultimately repelled by warriors of numerous Space Marine chapters, commanded by the Ultramarines chapter master Marneus Calgar, Vigilus would remain under siege from Orc, Drukhari, and Genestealer cult factions. Now we would turn our eyes back to the events on Baal. In a desperate attempt to stave off the Tyranid advance in the Baal system, the Blood Angels sacrificed the shield worlds of the Cryptus system. However, Baal itself would soon face the relentless assault of the Hive Fleet Leviathan. The Tyranid swarm was so vast that it would even obscure the stars, as Lord Commander Dante would seek to fortify the homeworld of the Blood Angels and its moons like never before. going so far as to deploying preemptive strike forces to delay and diminish the living armada of hundreds of splinter fleets of Tyranids. All of these splinter fleets would be defeated, but it was not enough, as Hive Fleet Leviathan would learn rapidly and adapt, gaining a particular hatred for the Blood Angels and those of the bloodline of the Angel, quickly finding ways to counter their strategies. As the Tyranids advanced, annihilating all life in the surrounding sector before making planetfall on Baal and the Twin Moons, the Blood Angels enacted a rather sacrilegious and dangerous ploy. They would bring a force equivalent to the legions of old, calling in aid from all their successor chapters, and almost every single chapter born from the blood of the Angel would come to their aid, and would be able to repel the first 19 waves at great cost, losing 5 chapter masters, including 3 at the Battle of the Dome of the Angels. As the Tyranids began consuming all biomass from Baal and its moons, including the radiation-poisoned deserts of Baal Secundus, which rendered the defenses of the Blood Angels in all but ruins, and Baal's moons stripped bare of life. The remaining Space Marines retreated into the rubble of the Blood Angels' fortress monastery, preparing for a final stand. As doom seemed inevitable for the sons of Sanguinius, the damned would march with the damned. At this critical moment, the Great Rift would erupt, and the galaxy would tremble, following the fall of Cadia and the 13th Black Crusade. Fortunately, the Baal system was blasted by the etheric storms, temporarily halting Hive Fleet Leviathan's coordinated attacks. Unfortunately, no Imperial defenders survived on Baal Prime, and the Tyranids on Baal itself at this point still outnumbered the remaining Space Marines and the host of mutated monsters which the Blood Angels unleashed from their deepest sanctuaries. Yet just as hope seemed to be lost, the stars reappeared, and Roboute Guilliman and his Indomitus Crusade had arrived. After numerous fierce battles, Baal would be finally liberated, as there was even an appearance of the Legion of the Damned led by the Sanguinor himself, and Baal would finally be truly liberated from the xenos threat, leading to a great rebuilding as the Blood Angels and their successors were now essentially reformatted into a pseudo-legion, having Dante become the Warden of the North, commanding a military might equivalent to that of a Primarch. For a significant chunk of the remaining Hive Fleet Leviathan remains uncertain. However, a clue was found on one of the barren moons of Baal, in particular Baal Prime, where the skulls of uncountable numbers of xenos were piled high in the much reviled 8-pillared symbol of one of the Blood Angels' most ancient and terrible of Nemesis, the Bloodthirster Kabanda, and his coronate demon army. It seems that rather than allow the Blood Angels to perish to any other threat, the line of Sanguinius would only be allowed to fall under the hand of Kabanda, leading to the personal eradication of a significant cluster of these xenos by the great and powerful Bloodthirster. In the shadowy recesses of the Era Indominus lies the Talledus War, a grim war of faith between the relentless forces of chaos and the defenders of the Imperium of Man. The conflict would itself be centered around the shrine world of Benediction in the Talledus sector, located within the Vetrus subsector. While Benediction was the primary target, the entire system faced a comprehensive assault from the Dark Apostle Kor Phaeron of the Wordbearers. The Wordbearers, notorious for their zeal in converting humanity to the worship of the Chaos Gods, relished in the opportunity to assault such a place of spiritual significance. They viewed the fall of Talledus and Benediction, alongside with the conversion of its inhabitants to chaos, as a crucial step in a grand scheme to overthrow the individual they referred to as the Corpse God, and claim the Imperium of Mankind for the Dark Gods. The war unfolded in 3 distinct fronts: Benediction, the Astra Militarum fortress world of Grahadusk, and the void surrounding the asteroid belt, known as the Tears of the Emperor, at the system's edge. The battle on Benediction witnessed Kor Phaeron's forces, who were previously close to seizing control of the Grand Honorificum Cathedral City Complex, be pushed back due to a miraculous phenomenon during the Psychic Awakening, turning the tide, as the faith of those gathered in the cathedral summoned protective spirits from the warp, the sacred Imperial Dead, forming what would later be known as the Saints' Wall. This psychic shield repelled many of the demons in Kor Phaeron's army allowing a demi-company of salamanders Astartes to cut through the remaining Chaos troops and establish a new defensive perimeter around the cathedral. Then there is the Siege of Grehedusk, where the Imperial defenders faced a formidable threat from the Soul Harvester, a mobile fortress factory deployed by the Word Bearers. This situation seemed dire. That was until a Black Templar strike force intervened, destroying the Soul Harvester in a self-destructive counterassault that claimed the lives of Commander Castellan Darmus. This heroic sacrifice disrupted the Chaos assault and bolstered the Imperium's defenses. In the void, within the tiers of the Emperor, a piratical Night Lord's fleet led by the battleship Nightmare of Clivix sought to ensnare the Imperial military and commercial vessels entering the system from the warp. Utilizing the captured Imperial astropaths, the Night Lords disrupted the navigational abilities of incoming ships, plundering their cargo like cowards and reveling in the terror they could inflict upon the much weaker mortal men. The arrival of a vanguard of Marines from the White Scar's 10th Brotherhood would manage to shift this balance. Their hit-and-run tactics escalated into a vicious void battle-based guerrilla warfare, with both sides attempting to lure the other into ambushes, and while the White Scars managed to blunt the Night Lord's attack on Imperial shipping, they could not completely annihilate the threat of the Chaos raiding force. Despite the Imperium's success in blunting the Chaos assault on all fronts, the conflict remains far from over, as the war for the Talledus system is a brutal testament to the unyielding conflict of the great enemy and the defenders of mankind, one which seems eternal and everlasting. A saga of faith, loyalty, sacrifice, and relentless warfare. Another important incident that must be marked is the Plague Wars, which marked a harrowing chapter on the realm of Ultramar, as it was an insidious campaign launched by the demonic and heretical forces of the Chaos god Nurgle, spearheaded by the demon primarch Mortarion and his Death Guard Traitor Legion. Their aim was to corrupt and conquer Ultramar into Nurgle's burgeoning domain in real space. The conflict began in the aftermath of the Great Rift's formation and the onset of Noctis Arithana, and concluded sometime around 12 M42. However, records seem to change and shift ever so slightly, depending on the source. After Primarch Roboute Guilliman successfully concluded the first glorious phase of the Indomitus Crusade with the Battle of Rukos, he secured much-needed Imperial reinforcements for Ultramar. To the galactic north of Ultramar, Nurgle's followers established a stronghold in the Scourge Stars, a festering bastion of corruption that emerged following the 13th Black Crusade and the subsequent fall of Cadia, as the planet broke before the Guard. From this vile epicenter, armies of Nurglite demons, accompanied by the treacherous forces of the Death Guard Legion and innumerable renegades and chaos cultists, launched 3 grotesque spearheads into the Ultramar system and Ultramar proper. These invaders would worsen things by not only invading and assaulting in conventional manners, but spreading an unnatural pestilence, which they used to assault along 100 individual fronts. Despite the valiant efforts and resistance from both Astartes and mortal defenders, the forces of Ultramar quickly lost ground, but eventually reinforcements arrived in the form of Primaris Space Marines of the Ultima founding, who were dispatched from Terra aboard Fleet Avenger. This was upon the successful completion of Guilliman's Terran Crusade. However, these formidable warriors could only delay the advance. By 012 M42, the defenders across Ultramar were severely depleted. After numerous ground campaigns, concurrently, a plague fleet systematically dismantled the realm of Ultramar's defenses, along with a myriad of unnumbered star fortresses. Guilliman's return from his Indomitus Crusade and his strategic maneuvers, as he managed to just in time launch the divisive Spear Espandor counterattack. This effort eventually ground the combined plague armies into a standstill amidst the ruins of Lax, and despite Mortarion's escape back to the Scourge Stars under the cover of virus bombs, Guilliman's staunch defense and the counterassault on Nurgle's realm in real space by the forces of Khorne prevented further chaos. In the aftermath of Mortarion's defeat, Guilliman initiated a comprehensive rebuilding of Ultramar, as he also established new procedures for creating Ultramarines, ensuring the realm's future defense. However, the relative peace would be short-lived, as new Imperial Crusades soon demanded the attention of the Lord Commander, drawing him back into the galaxy's darkness. Meanwhile, the Ultramarines diligently prepared for the eventual retribution of the Dark Gods, since their father, with the Emperor's sword in hand, had permanently burned a section of Nurgle's garden away. The next and final major event that has been recorded to any particular length within the galaxy would be the Fourth Tyrannic War, which erupted during the era Indomitus, when the largest contingent of Hive Fleet Leviathan yet launched an assault on the western reaches of Segmentum Pacificus. This offensive targeted the relatively undefended region of the galaxy, which allowed them to capitalize on the Imperium's preoccupation with the forces of chaos, which were emanating from the Great Rift. The Tyranid onslaught began with a coordinated strike from both above and below the galactic plane by 3 tendrils of Hive Fleet Leviathan, which would be known as Hive Fleet Nathalon, Hive Fleet Palthamor, and Hive Fleet Grinaldus. These tendrils advanced in parallels towards their ultimate goal, Terra, located in Segmentum Solar. With the Imperium's resources stretched thin by the Indomitus Crusade, few human forces would be able to contend with this threat. That is, until Lord Commander Guilliman and Captain General Trajan Valoris led new fleets to counter this threat. Along with this, there are the unknown claims of another loyalist Primarch emerging in Imperium Nihilus and combating the demon Primarch of Khorne, Angron. However, as far as Terra is concerned, these claims are unsubstantiated and of no import, as Holy Terra itself remains on the verge of potential extinction.